When our power-hungry HOA president illegally towed my motorcycle, he had no idea he'd just messed with the CEO of Harley-Davidson, setting off a chain of events that would expose years of corruption in our neighborhood. What would you do if you caught your HOA president pocketing thousands in illegal towing fees from your neighbors? Welcome to my channel. Comment below where you're watching from. The moment I pulled into my driveway after 3 weeks of secret meetings about my new role as CEO, I knew something was wrong. The sunset was painting the sky orange, but that wasn't what caught my eye. It was the even brighter orange paper flapping on my garage door. My heart sank as I got closer. This had to be Tom Hiddleston's doing. I'd only met our HOA president twice since moving in 6 months ago, but those 2 meetings were enough to know he ran the neighborhood like his own personal kingdom. The first time he'd lectured me for 15 minutes because my grass was half an inch too tall. The second time he'd sent someone to measure the exact distance between my mailbox and the curb. Pulling the notice off my door, my hands shook with frustration. Violation, unauthorized vehicle storage, remove motorcycle within 48 hours or face immediate towing and fines. Below that, in Tom's annoyingly perfect handwriting, motorcycles reduce property values and attract an undesirable element to our community. I looked at my pristine 2023 Harley-Davidson Road Glide, which cost more than Tom's imported SUV. I'd spent countless weekends carefully washing and polishing it, even teaching neighborhood kids a thing or two about motorcycle maintenance. Old Mr. Johnson from next door often brought his grandson over to admire it. Just then, Tom Hiddleston power-walked past my house in his designer athletic wear, his perfectly styled silver hair barely moving. He didn't wave, didn't stop, just gave my bike a pointed look and tapped his $500 smartwatch. The message was clear. Time was ticking. I wanted to run after him, to explain that I wasn't just some guy with a motorcycle. I was about to be announced as the new CEO of Harley-Davidson. The press release was scheduled for next week, but something told me to wait, to document everything. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. Of the bike, the notice, the spotless condition of my driveway. Just then, my neighbor Daniel came outside to water his lawn. Daniel, Tom's right-hand man on the HOA board, was always backing up the most ridiculous rules. "Shame about that bike," he called out, not sounding sorry at all. Rules are rules. I noticed the new tow truck parked in his driveway, the logo painted fresh on the side, Daniel's Towing. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just about community standards or property values. Something else was going on. Inside my house, I opened my laptop and pulled up the HOA documents. 3 hours and 2 cups of coffee later, I still couldn't find a single bylaw that explicitly banned motorcycles, but I did find something interesting. Every vehicle that had been towed in the past year had been handled by Daniel's Towing, and the fees were suspiciously high. My phone buzzed. Another HOA email. Emergency board meeting tomorrow. Vehicle policy updates. The timing wasn't just convenient. It was calculated. As the sun dipped lower through my window, I saw Tom and Daniel talking in Tom's driveway, both of them glancing toward my garage. I closed my laptop and smiled. They had no idea who they were dealing with, but they were about to find out. Sometimes the biggest mistakes come from judging a book by its cover, or in this case, judging a CEO by his motorcycle. I had 48 hours to stop them, and I already had a plan forming. The morning sun hadn't even risen when my security camera's alert woke me. Through the bedroom window, I watched in shock as a blue tow truck reversed into my drive. My heart pounded as I threw on clothes and sprinted downstairs, but by the time I got outside, my beloved Harley was already chained up and rolling away. The truck's logo glinted in the dim light. Daniel's Towing. I jumped in my car to follow, but the truck disappeared around the corner. A moment later, my phone buzzed. A text from Tom. HOA regulations enforced. On office hours at 9 a.m. It was barely 6 a.m. He'd planned this. At exactly 9 a.m., I walked into the HOA office, trying to stay calm. Tom sat behind his desk like a king on his throne, wearing his signature pearl cufflinks and a smug grin that made my blood boil. Daniel lounged in the corner chair, spinning a set of tow truck keys in his hand. "Mr. Z's," Tom said, not even looking up from his computer. "I have your paperwork right here." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a copy of some HOA rule about recreational vehicles I'd never seen before, highlighted in neon yellow. "This is ridiculous," I said, keeping my voice even. "That bike is worth more than your yearly salary. You can't just take it." Tom finally looked up, adjusting his designer glasses. "Actually, we can. Article 7, Section 12 clearly states no recreational vehicles may be stored in driveways." "You put that notice up while I was away on business," I replied. Daniel chuckled. "Rules are rules." "We take property values very seriously here," Tom said, voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Some of us can't afford to live in neighborhoods with motorcycles everywhere." He said motorcycles like it was a slur. What he didn't know was that I'd just been named CEO of Harley-Davidson. The news wouldn't go public for another week. Some final paperwork with the board was still pending. I could have told him, watched his smug smile vanish, but I didn't. "Where's my bike?" I asked instead. "Safe at Daniel's impound lot," Daniel replied. "Standard retrieval fee is $500, cash only." He grinned, teeth as white as Tom's cufflinks. I pulled out my phone and started snapping pictures of the documents. Tom's smile flickered. "Photography isn't allowed in the office," he snapped. "Interesting rule," I said. "Is that written down somewhere too?" As I walked out, I heard them whispering behind me. Glancing through the glass door, I saw Daniel slip something into Tom's desk drawer. That's when I noticed the security camera in the corner. I had a feeling those tapes might reveal more than they intended. Back in my car, I looked again at the paperwork. The HOA rule they cited had a revision date from just last month. Strange timing. Even stranger? The towing company's address matched a property Daniel had purchased last year, right after being named Tom's special advisor for community enforcement. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Tom Hiddleston. "Impound fees increase by $1,100 daily. Better hurry." I smiled, thinking about the press conference scheduled for next week. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting people dig their own holes. I just had to wait and watch Tom and Daniel dig a little deeper. But I couldn't sleep that night, not with my Harley missing. At 3 a.m., I opened my laptop and started combing through the HOA website. Something about the bylaw Tom had quoted didn't feel right. 20 minutes and 4 cups of coffee later, I found it, a complete digital archive of our HOA rules going back 15 years. My hands started to shake when I saw it. The motorcycle rule Tom used? It was never actually approved by the board. He had simply added it to the HOA website 3 months ago, right after Daniel's towing company won the HOA contract. Speaking of Daniel, something about his company's name struck me. Daniel's Premium Towing Service, LLC. I pulled up the state business registry. Daniel's company was registered just 4 months ago. Even stranger, it listed the same address as Tom Hiddleston's personal real estate office. I kept digging. I pulled up every HOA financial record I could find. In just the past 3 months, Daniel's Towing had been paid $47,000 for community services. That was a ridiculous amount of towing for a small neighborhood like ours. That's when I remembered something my neighbor Michael had told me. He works at the county clerk's office. HOA records are public information. At 8 a.m. sharp, I was waiting outside his office. What Michael helped me find made my jaw drop. Tom had quietly changed our HOA's banking arrangement 6 months ago, moving all our accounts to a tiny regional bank. Guess who sat on the board of directors? Daniel. But the real bombshell came when Michael pulled up property records. Daniel didn't just own the towing company. His wife owned the storage lot where the towed vehicles were being held, and the fees they were charging 3 times the legal limit under state law. I stepped outside for some air and crossed the street to the cafe. That's when I saw them. Tom and Daniel having lunch at a sidewalk table like nothing was wrong. They were laughing, probably thinking they'd won. Tom was waving a piece of paper that looked suspiciously like another violation notice. Through the window, I saw Daniel scribbling something in a small black notebook. Back inside the clerk's office, I found one more document that tied it all together. Tom had sent out a notice last week announcing a new community improvement fee for all homeowners, supposedly to fund better neighborhood security. But the amount? It exactly matched the inflated storage fees Daniel's company had been charging. I carefully packed up all the documents and asked Michael to certify every copy. As I walked to my car, I spotted a familiar blue tow truck rolling past, one of Daniel's. The driver didn't recognize me, but I recognized him. It was Tom's son. The same son he'd told everyone was away at college. I snapped a photo with my phone. That night, I sat in my home office, surrounded by papers and post-it notes. I connected all the dots: illegal rules, fraudulent financial records, a towing racket, a hidden family network. My phone buzzed. Another message from Tom. "Hope you're not too upset about the bike, just following the rules." Little did he know, I had just finished scanning every piece of evidence and sending it to my legal team at Harley-Davidson. The real question was, how would Tom look in orange? Because prison jumpsuits might be in his future. My hands were steady as I signed the certified letter that revealed my identity. CEO of Harley-Davidson. The timing wasn't perfect. We hadn't made the public announcement yet. But this couldn't wait. Tom's illegal towing scheme had pushed me too far. That weekend I spent every waking hour gathering stories from other neighbors. The Jacksons had lost their vintage Mustang. The Garcias, their restored Triumph motorcycle was towed while they were on vacation. Even Mrs. Linda's grandson, his first car, was taken during a family dinner. Each story made my blood boil more, but I stayed focused. That's when my assistant Maria burst into my office, out of breath. "Breaking news," she said. "Tom's planning to auction off the towed vehicles this weekend. My Harley was going to be sold to the highest bidder unless I paid thousands in fake fees." He'd sent the notice to my old business address, probably hoping I wouldn't see it in time. I pulled out my phone and called Ray Martinez, president of the State Motorcycle Rights Association. "Ray, remember when I helped fight that unfair helmet law last year? I need a favor." Within the hour, my inbox exploded with messages from motorcycle clubs across the state. They were furious about the HOA's discriminatory policies targeting bikes. Tom's response to my certified letter came faster than I expected. A uniformed courier delivered an envelope to my door. Inside, a bill for $4,500 in towing and storage fees, and a handwritten note in Tom's pristine cursive. "Rules are rules, Mr. Zeitz. Payment required within 24 hours or the vehicle will be considered abandoned." But something on the bill caught my eye. It matched the letterhead I'd seen from Daniel's towing company, but the bank account listed was different. A quick search revealed it belonged to an LLC registered under Tom's husband's name. They weren't just towing vehicles. They were running a full-scale fraud operation. I stayed up late into the night building the case. Property records showed Tom had purchased 3 homes in the neighborhood for suspiciously low prices, all from families who'd left after massive towing debts. The Garcias had even declared bankruptcy. The pattern was clear. Target families, harass them, tow their vehicles, bankrupt them, and buy their homes at a discount. At midnight, my doorbell rang. It was Brian, Mrs. Linda's grandson. "Mr. Zeitz," he said, "I work at the courthouse records department. You need to see this." He handed me a thick folder. Dozens of vehicle auctions, all conducted without proper notice or permits, all tied to Tom and Daniel. They hadn't just taken my bike. They'd stolen millions in property from our neighbors. I picked up my phone and called Kevin, our local investigative journalist. "Kevin," I said, "remember that tip I promised you about corruption in housing? It's time." I also sent emails to every board member on the HOA, except Tom and Daniel, attaching evidence of the scam. The storm was about to hit, but first I had a rally to plan. Just before dawn, I got an anonymous text. "Auction moved up. Tomorrow 9 a.m. They were trying to sell my bike before I could stop them, but as I watched the sun rise over our quiet suburban street, I smiled. Tom had no idea what was coming. The rumble of engines in the distance told me the cavalry was already on its way. Saturday morning dawned crisp and clear. I sipped my coffee on the porch, watching dew evaporate off the grass. The quiet didn't last long. At exactly 8 a.m., the distant roar of motorcycles shattered the morning silence. Tom was already outside in his pink bathrobe, watering his prized rose bushes, when the first group of riders turned onto our street. His head snapped up. They came in waves. Cruisers, sport bikes, vintage classics, all spotlessly maintained. The Veterans Motorcycle Club led the charge. Behind them came the Ladies of Chrome, the Classic Riders Association, and at least a dozen other clubs. Dozens, maybe hundreds of riders rolled down our street. Each wore a bright yellow vest, emblazoned with bold black letters, Anti-Discrimination Rally. And I'd made sure every single bike met noise regulations to the letter and was street legal. Tom Hiddleston's garden hose dropped to the ground as he watched hundreds of motorcycles fill every legal parking space along our streets. His perfectly styled hair was still in curlers as he frantically dialed his phone. "Daniel! Daniel, get over here now!" he screeched, but Daniel was busy dealing with the news van that had just pulled up in front of his towing company. I walked over to Tom, keeping my voice calm and professional. "Beautiful morning for a community gathering, isn't it?" I said, handing him a thick envelope. Inside was a cease and desist letter from my legal team, along with photographs of every illegal tow Daniel had performed in the past year. "You can't do this," Tom sputtered, mascara smudging as stress overwhelmed him. "This is a quiet neighborhood. We have rules." Just then, Mrs. Linda from across the street walked up with a tray of cookies. "Actually, Tom," she said, "we check the bylaws. There's nothing against organized community events." Behind her, the Rodriguez family was setting up a lemonade stand for the riders. Even old Mr. Johnson, who complained about everything, was in his garage showing off his restored 1950 Harley-Davidson to a group of amazed bikers. Tom's face turned purple as he saw more neighbors coming out to join the rally. The Williams kids were getting motorcycle safety lessons in the cul-de-sac from certified instructors I'd brought in. The Patels were photographing every bike for their son's school project on different types of engines. "I'm calling the police," Tom shouted, his hand shaking as he punched in 911-1. I smiled and pointed down the street. "Already taken care of," I said. Officer Rivera was already parked near the corner, waving back as he accepted a cookie from Mrs. Linda. "We have all the proper permits," I continued. "And speaking of police, they're very interested in those kickbacks you've been getting from Daniel's towing company." The color drained from Tom's face as another vehicle pulled up, a van marked District Attorney's Office. A forensic accountant stepped out, carrying boxes of HOA financial records I'd subpoenaed last week. "This isn't over," Tom hissed, turning to storm back into his house. But he stopped short when he saw what was parked in my driveway. My original Harley, returned, detailed, and gleaming, sat proudly behind a large sign that read, "Protected by the U.S. Constitution and the CEO of Harley-Davidson." Tom slammed his door, but the sound was drowned out by the roar of hundreds of motorcycles revving in perfect unison. Mrs. Linda handed me a cookie and smiled. "Best Saturday morning ever," she said. I couldn't help but agree as I looked around. Our neighborhood, once ruled by fear and petty power, had become something else, a true community. What began as a quiet motorcycle rally had quickly become a media spectacle. By noon, 5 different TV stations were parked outside our neighborhood gates. I watched Tom pacing in his front yard, phone glued to his ear, as the first reporter approached me with a microphone. "Mr. Zeitz, can you tell us about the HOA's towing practices?" the reporter asked. I smiled, reached into my briefcase, and pulled out a thick blue folder our forensic accountant had prepared. "I think these documents will interest you more than my motorcycle," I said, flipping open to the first page. Over the past 3 years, Daniel's Towing has removed 68 vehicles from our neighborhood. And strangely, every single one of those tows happened within 24 hours of residents questioning HOA fees. The reporter's eyes widened as she turned the pages. Bank statements showing suspicious transfers between the HOA's account and an offshore company. That's when Daniel, who'd been hiding behind his curtains, burst out of his house. "You can't prove anything," he shouted, but his face went pale when I held up another set of documents. "Actually, we can," I said calmly, showing the cameras a series of checks. Every time a car was towed, half the fee was funneled into a company called Urban Solutions. Guess who owns that company? Tom Hiddleston and Daniel. More neighbors came outside, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Linda stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "They towed my grandson's car on Christmas Eve," she said into the microphone. "We had to pay $400 to get it back." That opened the floodgates. One by one, neighbors shared their stories. The Martinez family lost their work van. The Patels had their daughter's first car towed during her college graduation party. Each story matched a payment listed in our documents. Finally, Tom emerged from his house wearing oversized designer sunglasses to hide his expression. "This is all a misunderstanding," he said, attempting to sound composed. "As HOA president, I have a duty to maintain property values." "By stealing from your neighbors?" I asked, loud enough for the cameras and everyone to hear. I held up one final document. A list of recent property sales. Interesting how many homes were sold at below market value after the owners were hit with towing fees they couldn't afford. Even more interesting, how many of those homes were bought by shell companies connected to you and Daniel. The crowd went silent. Tom's sunglasses couldn't hide the sweat running down his face. Daniel had disappeared again, retreating inside. But I wasn't finished. "I have one more thing to share," I said, pulling out my phone. On the screen was a security camera video from my garage. It showed Tom Hiddleston himself directing the tow truck to my motorcycle at exactly 6 a.m. The timestamp clearly showed it was well before the 48-hour notice period had expired. As the cameras rolled and neighbors watched, Tom cracked. "Fine," he screamed. "You people deserve it, with your tacky cars and motorcycles ruining our prestigious community." A police car pulled up quietly behind the news vans. 2 officers stepped out. I recognized them. They weren't just officers. They were members of one of the motorcycle clubs that had joined our rally. They approached Tom, search warrants in hand. I turned back to the cameras. "This isn't just about a motorcycle anymore," I said. "It's about standing up to people who abuse their power. And it's about bringing a community together." Behind me, neighbors were hugging and sharing stories. Years of fear and suspicion melting away as Tom's little empire crumbled. The morning of the emergency HOA meeting, I found a plain brown envelope on my doorstep. Inside were photos of Tom and Daniel at their monthly dinners with the towing company owners, plus receipts showing they'd been selling impounded vehicles without notifying the owners. My neighbor Jimmy, who worked at Daniel's Towing, had finally found the courage to expose everything. The community center was packed like never before. People lined the hallways, some even watched through the windows. When I walked to the front of the room, Tom tried to start with his usual droning speech, but this time was different. I held up my phone and cast the security footage to the big screen. Tom illegally ordering the tow. "Before we begin," I said calmly, "I think we need to talk about where all our towing fees really go." Tom's face turned crimson. I followed with the dinner photos, then the shell companies, then the offshore accounts. Daniel jumped up, yelling something about privacy violations, but no one was listening anymore. One by one, neighbors stood to speak. Mrs. Garcia's son's bicycle, Mr. Thompson's restored Mustang, even Mrs. Linda's gardening tools, all mysteriously towed and sold without notice. This time, no one doubted what really happened. Then came the big surprise. Our forensic accountant, Mr. Roberts, walked into the meeting room with 3 large boxes of documents. "Over the past 5 years," he announced, "Tom Hiddleston and Daniel have collected over $200,000 in unauthorized fees from this neighborhood." The room erupted in angry shouts, gasps, murmurs, even curses. Tom tried to grab his designer bag and make a run for it, but 2 uniformed police officers were already waiting at the door. I raised my hand for quiet. "As your neighbor, and as the CEO of Harley-Davidson's, I have a different vision for our community." The room fell silent. I unveiled a new plan, a fresh start, a real community-driven initiative. Free motorcycle safety courses for residents, a scholarship fund for young aspiring mechanics, a monthly neighborhood bike show to bring us together instead of tearing us apart. "This neighborhood doesn't need stricter rules and secret backroom deals," I said. "It needs community." The vote to remove Tom and Daniel was unanimous, no hesitation. As they were escorted out, I noticed something unexpected. People were smiling, laughing, talking to neighbors they'd never spoken to before. Mrs. Linda offered to teach gardening classes. Mr. Thompson volunteered his garage for basic car maintenance workshops. The Garcia kids started planning a bicycle repair club for local teens. Today, our neighborhood looks very different. The community center parking lot hosts motorcycle safety courses every weekend. Local kids learn about engines in our new workshop program. Even a few of the former HOA board members now ride motorcycles. Properly parked, of course. Last week I received a letter from Tom's new neighborhood across town. He was complaining about motorcycle noise and asking for support. I sent back a Harley-Davidson catalog with a simple note. Bikes still available at employee discount. CEO. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just winning. It's building something better from the wreckage your enemies tried to leave behind. 6 months after Tom's departure, I received an unexpected email that made my morning coffee taste even sweeter. A neighborhood association from across town reached out. Their HOA president, another Tom Tuck named Susan, had been pulling the same towing scam, just with a different company. They'd heard our story and wanted help to fight back. I invited them to our newly renovated community center. The same walls that once held HOA violation posters now displayed photos of our neighborhood's transformation. The room was packed as I shared our journey. But the real shock came when Daniel's son stepped forward. Fighting back tears, he revealed a folder of documents. It showed that his father and Tom had been running similar towing rackets in 3 other neighborhoods. Same pattern, same tactics. The next day, I called an emergency meeting of Harley-Davidson's board. By the end of the session, we launched something new, the Ride Free, Live Fair initiative, a national legal defense fund for homeowners facing HOA harassment. Our neighborhood became the pilot program and our community center the movement's headquarters. But the biggest twist of all? We discovered that Tom hadn't actually moved away. He had simply relocated his operation to a retirement community in Florida. A resident there, a retired judge named Bill, recognized him from our viral news story and reached out. Within days, our legal team was working with their community to build a case. I got to deliver the news in person during our first annual Neighborhood Unity Ride. Seeing hundreds of residents, from kids on bicycles to grandparents on trikes, parading through the same streets Tom once ruled through fear, it felt like everything had come full circle. The old storage shed where Tom used to hold his secret HOA meetings, we turned it into a free motorcycle maintenance workshop for local youth. Every Saturday, I teach alongside former gang members who are now certified Harley mechanics. Together, we show kids there's more than one way to belong. Last week, I got a call from a national news network. They want to run a feature about how one towed motorcycle sparked a nationwide movement against HOA abuse. As I hung up, I noticed a familiar tow truck driving past my house. But this time, it had a new logo, Community First Towing, protecting neighborhoods, not profits. Looking at my Harley gleaming in the driveway, I couldn't help but smile. Tom's illegal towing scheme hadn't just taken my bike, it had shifted my perspective on leadership, justice, and what it means to serve a community. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest injustices, and the best revenge? It's making sure nobody else ever has to go through what you did. What started with one illegally towed motorcycle exposed a $200,000 corruption scheme run by an HOA president and his towing partner. But it didn't end there. It sparked a movement. When Tom Hiddleston towed my Harley, he didn't know he was messing with the future CEO of Harley-Davidson. I stayed quiet, documented everything, and what I uncovered was bigger than anyone expected. Fraudulent bylaws, kickbacks, shell companies, and stolen vehicles from families who couldn't fight back. But here's the lesson. Corruption hides behind titles, rules, and silence. The moment you start asking questions, the truth unravels. Don't let fear stop you from defending what's right. Today, our neighborhood isn't run by fear, it's powered by community. We've turned old towing lots into youth workshops. We launched Ride Free, Live Fair, a national initiative helping others fight back. So if you've ever felt powerless in your own neighborhood, you're not alone. Stand up, speak out, And always document everything. Subscribe to the HOA Revenge YouTube channel for stories, tools, and inspiration to protect your rights. Follow us if you believe community should come before corruption. Sometimes the best revenge is rebuilding something better.